would like also to stop a video. No, but I will stay here on the right. Okay, thank you very much. And first of all, I would like to thank everybody. And especially, I would like to thank the organizers of Herodotus Helpline, Tom and Jan. As for me, it's been so far truly helpful, really. And I have learned a lot. What I would like to present here is just a work in progress, or better to say a preliminary stage, and every suggestion or comment will be warmly welcomed. Of course, there is no need to recall here the importance and the role which Croesus, the last king of independent Lydia, plays in the first book of the histories. Given that the entire Lydicos Logos, which is also a sort of a general introduction and an instruction manual to the whole inquiry, revolves around his res gestae and his personality. Certainly, in Herodotus' times, Croesus was already a legendary figure among the Greeks, but no one can doubt that he owes his long-lasting fortune, I dare say, his immortality, especially to Herodotus' portrait. The starting point of my talk will be a question. Why did Herodotus give him a second life? More broadly, what Croesus' second life could tell us about his overall role in the histories? In the slides, I collected all the passages in Herodotus that refer to Croesus after the fall of Sardis, except for the first, which is on the other PDF, together with the selective bibliography. The first episode, particularly famous and often retold, is the scene of Croesus on the pyre, a scene which ends with his miraculous salvation from the fire thanks to Apollo's intervention. In the same PDF, I have collected, besides the Herodotean chapters, the various versions, we may call them variations on a theme, offered by other sources, who predates Herodotus as Bacchylides' third Epinician, or who follows him, like Diodorus and Nicholas of Damascus. The latter, however, offers a long and complex account, which seems to combine the basic Herodotean elements with an alternative version, whose most probably origin is the local Lydian historian, Xanthus. I wonder if the fragments of the Hydria assigned by Beasley to the Leningrad painter could refer to this version. The gesture of grief, for example, has a parallel in the weeping and crying of the Lydian in the Nicholas fragment. Anyway, we cannot rule out the well-known dramatic touch of Nicholas himself. There are also at least two basically different versions of the story. One is given by Xenophon in his fictional Cyropedia, where Croesus is immediately pardoned by Cyrus and the incident of the pyre does not occur. The other is provided by Ctesias, who does not mention the pyre, but nonetheless reports a divine intervention. After the conquest of Sardis, Croesus' son was killed and his wife committed suicide, while he fled in the temple of Apollo, where was captured and enchained. He escaped the bonds put upon him 3 times before being taken to the palace and bound ever more securely. Here, he again mysteriously shed his bonds amidst thunder and lightning. Eventually, Cyrus released him, treated him kindly, and gave him a city named Barine near Ecbatana to rule. As it is often remarked in modern scholarship, the considerable differences between these variants of the same event seem to indicate that the historical fate of Croesus was unknown. If we believe the older sources, such as the superb Mison's Amphora and Bacchylides verses, Croesus mounted on the pyre, never to be seen again, because Apollo transferred him to the Hyperboreans. He probably committed suicide when his capital fell in Cyrus' hands. However, while Herodotus is not alone in pretending that Croesus survived, he is the first and almost the sole author to give him a second chance, a long-lasting role as a friend and confidant of Cyrus, as well as a wise advisor of both Cyrus and his son Cambyses. Almost the sole author, I said, because Xenophon too reports in the Cyropedia that Croesus became Cyrus' friend and mentor, following him in Persia. His version, however, draws heavily on the Herodotean account, even if with different details and for philosophical reasons, as Anthony Ellis has convincingly shown. Except for Xenophon, no other source, to my knowledge, follows Herodotus in giving the Lydian king a second reprieve. Croesus' intense activity may be followed running quickly through the relevant passages. In 188, immediately after his salvation, Croesus, not requested, gives Cyrus the counsel not to let the Persian soldiers sack Sardis, and in 189 teaches him how to regain the booty, claiming a theft to the god without enraging the troops. In 190, he requests the Persian king to allow him to send his chains to the god of Delphi to ask if it is his way to deceive those who serve him well, and receives for the last time the oracle's answer, this time not an ambiguous response, but a long and detailed explanation. In 153, he travels to Ecbatana with Cyrus, and in 155, after Patua's revolt in Lydia, he explains to the Persian king, on his request, how to deal with the Lydians to keep them quiet, change their lifestyle to transform them in a people of women instead of men. Croesus, as the historian says in the next chapter, 156, I'm late with the thought this was better than slavery. He feared that even if the Lydians should escape this time, they might later revolt and be destroyed by the Persians. Cyrus gladly accepts Croesus' proposal, quitting his orge against the Lydians. This could have been for Croesus another convenient exit from the histories. Instead, his career goes on. He follows Cyrus in his campaign against the Massagetae, and we learn in 1207 that he is the one who counsels, alone among Cyrus' generals, to cross the Araxes and enter the land of the Massagetae to give battle, coming up with a tricky plan to deceive the enemies. Cyrus is again persuaded. However, despite the success of Croesus' plan, Cyrus is killed in the subsequent battle with Queen Tomir's army. Croesus, anyway, had left the camp before the final attack, as Cyrus has entrusted him to the care of his son and heir Cambyses, telling him to honor Croesus and treat him well if the crossing of the river against the Massagetae should not go well. So, in Book 3, we find again the former Lydian king, this time at Cambyses' side in Egypt. In a first occasion, he is portrayed bursting into tears, according to the Egyptians, Herodotus says, when he learned the answer that the defeated Egyptian king had given to Cambyses, who wanted to put his spirit to the test. Private griefs are too great for weeping, but the unhappiness of an old man fallen from abundance and prosperity to beggary deserves tears. In a second episode, 34, Croesus pleased the king when he begins to give sign of mental imbalance. To me, son of Cyrus, do not seem to be the equal of your father, for you had as yet no son, such as he left after him he knew. In 336, in his last appearance, Croesus, as a wise advisor, attempts unsuccessfully to persuade Cambyses to adopt a more moderate behavior after the killing of Praxaspes' son. The king, enraged, addressed him very harsh words. How do you dare to counsel me, you who govern your own country so well and gave fine advice to my father, that you work your own ruin and Cyrus, who trusted you? Croesus tries to run away, but is captured by Cambyses' guards. Anyway, they disobey to the king's order and spare his life. We don't know what Herodotus imagined had happened to Croesus after this last unpredicted salvation, given that he simply steps out of history. But it doesn't stop out of the histories, because there are some more references in the following books to his name and deeds. Every mention, however, is relative to the good old days of his reign, when he was the powerful and wealthy king of the Lydians. What should we think of these episodes? If compared to the Herodotus' power and grace in drawing the magnificent portrait of Croesus until his downfall, the collection of anecdotes about his second life sounds like a poorly directed sequel. Not only are they highly improbable on the historical level, but they seem also unnecessary to the narrative plot. The meeting of Croesus' and Solon is likewise hardly historical. Yet it is a scene of paramount importance, a point of reference for the later narrative, which provides a universal insight to be explored and reassessed throughout the histories. Not surprisingly, it's also one of the most famous pages in Greek literature, often revised and reworked. Generally speaking, these later anecdotes are often interpreted as a whole, as showing the power of pathematos, the learning from suffering, given that Croesus himself tells Cyrus he has learned the lesson. Ta demoi pathemata eonta acharita mathemata gegone. So it should be, and indeed he is, classed among the wise advisors that abound in the histories. However, at a closer look, he seems to have grown not that wise. As a matter of fact, he accused the oracle of his own mistakes. Also, he appears as the sole responsible of the debasement of his people to a womanly status. But in Herodotus' times, the Lydians were considered slaves of the Persian and a comic target because of their oriental flabbiness and dolce vita. He gives Cyrus the advice to cross the Araxes, as if he was not conscious of the dramatic results of his own crossing the Halys. He stoops so low to flatter Cambyses, fearing his instable temper. When we see him bursting into tears in Egypt, we don't know if he cries because he pities the misfortunes of Psammenitus, that of the old companion of the king,
so there's not much point.
or even his own, as a defeated ruler fallen from power to servitude. The final words about him, those of Cambyses, are a condemnation without appeal, and the last image we have of him is that almost ridiculous of an old man who jumps up from his seat and runs away, trying to avoid his master's arrows. Not surprisingly, these episodes did not attract the successive tradition. To my knowledge, are the least evoked of his entire saga. On these premises, I return to my question. What is then the meaning of Croesus' second life? I have no answer, not yet, but I would like to advance here a proposal, a path that may be further explored if it's not completely inconsistent. My point of departure is the tragic dimension of Croesus in the Lydicos Logos, a feature that has been already investigated, and Jan has recently written a splendid paper about it. And it's often stressed in Herodotean studies. The story of Croesus is in fact the tragedy of Croesus and that of his people, and eventually the tragedy of the Greek polis of Asia Minor. In addition, in this drama, another hyper-tragic story is enclosed, that of Adrastus and Attis, which significantly marks the beginning of the king's downfall. And we may add also the tragic motives in the episodes of Gyges and Candaules. But these issues not need right now to any further illustration, especially after Alexander's intervention. Equally important in this perspective is Herodotus' familiarity with the tragic theater, and in particular his relationship with Sophocles. Besides their personal friendship, attested by the sources, they both seem to value dreams, oracles, prophecies, and warnings that influence the lives of individuals. Legendary heroes in Sophocles and historical figures in Herodotus. As motivations for human conduct, they share fundamental concepts such as hubris, thesis, dike, tonos, and ate. As Martin Ostwald observed, and quote, just as the Sophoclean drama is shaped by great individuals who, in acting reasonably according to their lights, fall victim to forces over which they have no control, so Herodotus sees the mainspring of historical developments in individuals placed in a situation in which their decision lead not only them, but also the people whose destiny is tied up with theirs to an end which they did not foresee. Finally, as it is well known, there are some famous textual parallels, such as that between Antigone 905, 912 and Herodotus 3, 119. Anyway, assuming that the Herodotean Croesus is a tragic character, I wonder if it is plausible to compare and contrast him to another tragic figure who was given by Sophocles a second life, Oedipus, who is also the tragic hero par excellence, and who has recently been compared by Patrick Finglas to another Herodotean character. I would like to advance here just some preliminary remarks in this direction. Oedipus and Croesus are both tyrannoi by definition. They are powerful, wealthy leaders who came to fail miserably. On a side note, it may be remarked that, according respectively to Bernard Knox and John Moles, their tyrannies foreshadows in Sophocles and Herodotus' intention the same thing, the contemporary tyrant city, Athens. Oedipus and Croesus are closely connected with Delphi. Much more, their life stories are both announced by Delphi in advance, before the action begins. So in Herodotus, the story is already known, like in Oedipus. They equally fulfill the oracles after having misunderstood their real meaning, as the Pizziari books Croesus in 191-2. Each of them has a harsh and foolish reaction to the words of the wise man. Oedipus with Tiresias, Croesus with Solon. Oedipus prefers to forestall rather than react, as he says with condemning Creon. as Croesus preferred to cross the Alice before being attacked by Cyrus. Also, the tragedy ends with the expression of the same, if not an interpolation, ends with the expression of the same concept that lays at the heart of Croesus' story: call no man happy until his death. The most interesting resemblance, at least in my opinion, is that none of them dies at the end of his tragedy, as one could have expected. They both survive, but with a heavy limitation. Oedipus loses sight, Croesus his liberty. And apparently, they both learn from suffering to become wise men. If my parallel has any sense, it must be observed that the second life of Oedipus in the tragedy Oedipus at Colonus shows that indeed the hero has learned at his expenses, and sufferance made him a real wise man. Instead, according to our historian, Croesus is doomed, even if given a second chance, to repeat the same mistakes. The reason of the treatment Herodotus reserved to his Croesus, in my opinion, may be searched along two directions, both at the heart of Herodotus' portrait of the Lydian king. The first one is that Croesus' failure to learn must have or should have something to do with his being not a Greek hero, but a Lydian tyrannos. Certainly an honorary Greek, materially devoted to Delphi, but unable to understand Apollo's voice, generous host of the Greek Sophoi, but unable to appreciate Solon's advice. In short, a friendly barbarian, but a barbarian anyway. More than this, in the second direction, is introduced as the first barbarian king to commit unjust deeds toward the Greeks. But he is also presented in 130 as the first to commit injustice towards Cyrus, who, defeating him, became lord of the whole Asia. This double injustice of Croesus against the Greeks and against the Persians makes him the causal link connecting the ones and the others. In other words, the first historical arche kakon. And thank you.